Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's October 9, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. And shouts out to Rob Grant because it's his birthday today. Also, a big shout to Paul Levinson for introducing us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Anthony Marinelli. Is that the way to pronounce it?
Marinelli, yep.
Marinelli. Anthony, you want me to call you Anthony or Tony?
Call me Anthony.
Okay, Anthony, where in the heck you calling in from?
Marinelli, New Jersey.
New Jersey. How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Oh my God. The best thing for a human being is to be fulfilled in their relationships and their work.
That's good. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
That's a good question. I think personal, interacting with people on a personal level. I mean, I read a lot, so I read novels. I read, I have books everywhere. I'm always reading, so that's a great source of where information comes in, and also electronic.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, that's pretty good. You covered the waterfront there, dude. That's like McLuhan is 3 types: spoken word, printed word, and electronic word.
Yeah.
So spoken is, we call that direct experience, direct interaction.
Right.
Reading is printed word and electronic word. So let's just slip off the script here for a second on reading. Did you become a reader because your parents told you to read? They did it as an example or on your own?
On my own. I grew up in Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst, and my father was a police officer, New York police officer. And my mom was a mom. She was home with us. And neither one of them were very big readers. And my 2 brothers were very much into sports. And I was the one who's sort of the black sheep, where I was always reading comic books or novels or anything I can get my hands on. So I was definitely the odd duck in the family.
Cool.
So,
That's cool. So why do you think humans collect or gather information?
To put them in touch with the world, I think.
Yeah.
It's to understand, human behavior, I hope. I mean, at least that's why I do it.
Yeah. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate. I think it's up to the person. It's up to the person's natural curiosity, and everyone has different levels of curiosity, and that determines how much information, you want to gather. Yeah, I mean, I'm naturally, I'm pretty curious about everything. So, I try to, I don't know if I try to gather information, but I do a lot of directing, and as part of that process, I like to learn as much about people that are different from me.
Yeah.
Learn as much as possible.
And, I had a major epiphany at a party last night. This guy told me what he learned from Richard Linklater, the film director.
Yeah.
He's Dazed and Confused and Boyhood and Slacker. He says, on the set, when you meet the actor, that first 15 minutes is really important. Like, I don't have it memorized exactly, but it's like that relationship is formed right then. And you have, it was pretty intense what they said. So do thoughts create emotions?
Yes. I think, this is something, I always think about it. And it's like, you can't have a feeling without a thought. So, if you're thinking negatively, you're going to feel negatively. If you're thinking positively, you're going to feel positive. You're going to feel happy. So I believe that, thoughts create emotions and feelings.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Wow. I think meaning. I mean, I think happiness comes from meaning, like pursuing meaning, and what you find meaning in. And I kind of, I'm one of those people who I don't really believe in coincidence. I believe that things sort of happen for a reason. Like I'm very big into synchronicity because it just happens all the time. I always say like the worst thing that could happen is the best thing that could happen.
Exactly.
Because sometimes it may seem like a bad, like something might not seem right in the moment, but then it ends up being the best thing that could have happened. It leads to something that was better than what you had originally. So
yeah, well,
that's where the happiness comes from. It's like you find, if you could find, happiness through meaning, then I think that one leads to the other.
Yeah, because I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Meaning lasts. Happiness doesn't necessarily last.
Right. Yeah, happiness has to be renewed, I think.
Renewed. What a great word. Yeah.
It goes. And I think meaning is it's what you find meaning in.
Yeah.
And like I said, relationships and work and those things are things that I find meaningful, and that's where I get happiness from.
Anthony, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
try it.
Try it. Great verb.
Yeah.
Yeah. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Yeah, those are both great. Like McLuhan, it's funny because the way I came about, well, my first introduction to Marshall McLuhan is like most people through Annie Hall when Woody Allen went out onto the movie line. That's the first introduction, and then when you dig deeper, you find out that he coined the phrase global village, which is the world we live in now.
Yeah.
He coined that phrase in the late 50s, maybe early 60s, sort of predicting the way we were going to be living our lives in the future. And you mentioned Paul Levinson, and the way I met Paul was I was writing a play called Acoustic Space. And this is back in the early 2000s, probably 2001, 2002. And it was the early days of cell phones. And I remember sitting in a Starbucks during my lunch hour, and I looked over at this couple who was sitting across from me, and one of them, the guy was on his phone, and she was just kind of sitting there. Neither one of them, they weren't interacting. So, and I looked at them and I said, this is such a missed opportunity for connection. These people they're out together, but they're not together.
Yeah.
So that sparked an idea, and I wrote a play called Acoustic Space, which is about a couple who are out on a date, who can't complete a conversation because their cell phones keep ringing the whole time. So they're interacting and engaging with the people on their phones at the expense of each other. And I had at that time Paul's book Digital McLuhan came to my attention, and I read it, and it all just sort of. And here's what I say. This is what I mean about I don't believe in coincidence. I believe things happen for a reason. When you're looking for something, it appears to you if you're in tune to that. And that book just came into my hands at the exact right time. So I took a chance and I contacted Paul and asked him if he'd be interested to read my script, just to make sure that any details I put in about McLuhan and Acoustic Space, if I was accurate. I wanted to make sure I was accurate. So I figured I'd go to the person who's the expert. Yeah. And so I contacted him, and he was very gracious. I still have the letter he wrote. I mean, it was wonderful. He wrote a whole, wonderful analysis of it, and told me I was on the right track. And he gave me a couple of adjustments to make, which I did. And that was it. So that play, it was one of 3 one-act plays about how technology has changed the way we communicate. And my plan was to do this in a theater in the early 2000s, but that never happened. But what did happen was I ended up shooting Acoustic Space as a short film back in 2002 or 2003. And because of the nature of it, and excuse me if I'm rambling, but it just follows.
Fine.
Because of the nature of that film, it being an adaptation of a play, it didn't really go anywhere. So I entered film festivals, and I was politely turned down from a few and not so politely turned down from others. And then it basically sat on a shelf and I forgot about it. And then I think in 2012 or so, a friend of mine told me about a play festival that was coming up in Garrison, New York, the 2020 Airy Play Festival. And he asked me if I had anything I'd want to enter. And I said, you know what? I'm going to enter acoustic space and let's see what happens. So I pulled it out of mothballs, entered it into this play festival, got in. We ended up making it into the finals, and we didn't win best play. But it was all, the experience was awesome. It was a great experience. But then we got into another play festival, the Strawberry Play Festival, which was in New York City, and that one we won. We won best play of the season.
How cool!
Yeah,
what a great story.
Yeah.
And then there's one McLuhan line that you really evoked in that. And I am always welcome for anecdotes and stories to illustrate what we're doing here is dialogue. So McLuhan said, Americans go outside to be alone. So can humans think without language?
I don't know. I mean, I think you need language to. Well, yes, you need language to articulate your thoughts, but you can still have a thought. You just won't know what it means until you have language. So I'm not sure what the answer to that one is. What do you think?
Well, that's beautiful, Anthony, because that's what I want people to feel, that I'm not trying to put them on the spot. To say I don't know is a total valid. I mean, I get answers both ways. Most people say yes, they can think without language. A musician composer a couple of weeks ago said no. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's really just jumping off points for us to think and invent new questions. So your new question was, what do you think? I would just revert to John Cage. I says, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer.
Well, now you're making me think about it. It's I could see how you could have thoughts, but
it depends on how you define thinking. Yeah, when you think, because Chomsky says a language, and it's how you define language. Because Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
You live on instinct, I guess. Because that was the next question. That was the next thing that came to mind. It's like, what do animals? I mean, animals don't think per se, as far as I know. I mean, if a lion is stalking its prey, is it thinking about it, or is it just acting on instinct? So without language, I guess that's where we are. We're living on instinct, and we're acting on instinct.
I like the word instinct. That's what I'm after. And all these questions is more your impulse, instinct, hunch, guess.
Yeah.
And being willing to say, like you said, I don't know. That is an answer. That's totally valid. And in the follow-up is, are humans, your observations in humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
More. It's I don't know. I would say 50-50. I can't say more one or the other, because I think it's both. It's like those thoughts, thoughts create feelings kind of thing. We may not realize that our thoughts create feelings, but they do. You can't have a feeling until you've thought about something, and you may not be consciously aware that you're even thinking about how bad you feel, because you're not analyzing it, because you're too busy feeling. You know what I mean? So I think it's a 50-50 split. I don't think it's more either or the other.
Either way. Yeah. I get that up. Usually that is the most dominant answer I get from everyone. But Bridget Bardot says an interesting thing. She says, I don't think when I make love. And I'm like, good luck. Like, how can you turn your brain off when you're doing the most sensuous thing? And it's like people who meditate, they say, think about not thinking, So literally. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you just sparked something there. There's that book, the Unbearable Lightness of Being,
Yeah.
and if you're speaking about sex, and there may be that one moment and this is something that Milan Kundera points out in that book, and there's that moment during sex where you don't think anything, where everything is just gone, and it's a moment, and it comes and goes very quickly, but that might be the only time that we're not thinking. And I think that's what he meant by the unbearable lightness of being. It's so unbearable because it doesn't last, and it's a light moment that involves no thinking.
You mean this is, talk about coincidence, dude. My wife is reading that author, and yesterday I reserved the book and the movie Unbearable Lightness of Being.
Are you kidding? Wow.
And Snapchat, Snapchat sort of took over our hometown, Venice, California. And the kid is, who started Snapchat. That is his Bible.
Really?
Yeah. That is the book that turned him around. But talk about.
I haven't thought about that book in so long, but there's something,
But talk about synchronicity. As soon as you said the key line, you dropped out a little. So you said unbearable lightness of being, one moment in sex. So you're saying at the peak moment in sex, what happens? Because you flushed it out, but
that's the moment where there's no thought whatsoever. It's
no thought.
Yeah. It's pure whatever. It's that's what the unbearable lightness of being means, and that it's unbearable because it lasts like that.
That is so heavy. See, I should know that because I've asked people, because the Snapchat controversy here in Venice happened like a few years ago, and everybody's forgot about it because he left town, and I was asking all these highbrow literature people, what is the main thing in unbearable lightness of being? And one guy would go into this Marxist takedown, and no one told me that. And you would summarize it in one little thing, because it's sort of like first thought, best thought. And then what if that, first, the best thing is having a, climax in sex. But what has happened? Your brain thinking disappears. Well, is that good or bad? You would think it's like you're trying to appreciate the sensual experience to its max and not have thoughts clutter. But you might go, well, if I'm not having thoughts, I'm going to miss that it happened. That's T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot said they had the experience but missed the meaning.
Yeah.
And so there's one other thing. Frank Zappa asked a great question. Can you laugh and come at the exact same moment? I mean, the exact same moment. And some people, I'm not even asking you to answer it, but it is this puzzling question because it's almost the opposite unbearable. They're saying you climax, your brain goes away. But do you have to think to laugh? And do you have to think to come? So those two things are happening at once. That seems like sensory overload, but who knows?
I'll have to test it next time. I don't really. Because then the question is, when you're being tickled, are you thinking or are you just reacting? And,
right. That's a good one.
You don't have to, have to think about it. You just
tickle is a great. I should incorporate tickle into my I have a section where we can talk about laughter and comedy, but tickle is amazing because it's almost like forced laughter.
Yeah.
In a way, but so, and then there's a question. Well, I'll ask you this question anyways, because it's sort of, tell me an instrumental music piece that makes you laugh. There's no words.
What's the oh god, the one from, what was the Benny Hill?
Oh my god! You know what, dude?
The Yakov sax.
No, this ESP, this synchronicity thing with you is happening. My friend, one of my best friends who's a musician, says the Benny Hill theme. and
Yeah.
it's really good. It's instrumental, but it's it's juxtaposed with pantomime comedy.
Yes.
So
True.
you can't separate that. You didn't hear it without visual, but it is an answer because
Yeah.
it is an instrumental.
Yeah.
And as soon as I asked you, Benny Hill went through my head. You
Really?
know, oh, I'm serious. And then when you said that, I was like, "Oh my god, you just channeled Khalil."
Well, that piece is called Yakety Sax, I believe. I
Oh,
actually
Yakety Sax, yeah.
Yakety Sax, yeah. And it's funny because I did I was recently I edited a documentary called Finding Sandler,
Yeah,
which is about this filmmaker David Cohen who goes on a quest to have a drink with Adam Sandler that he passed up years before when he was a PA on Big Daddy. And there's a scene in the
yeah.
film where he meets this sort of blonde bombshell on the beach, and they have this chase scene. And we sped it up like Benny Hill. He chases her around the beach, and the only music that came to mind to use for that was Yakety Sax, because it was like, of course, you got to use that. It's a high speed, like silent
Cool.
movie chase scene.
Well, this is great because we went way off script, but it was so worth it. Just to now it's gonna make me Google Yakety Sax and find out who wrote it and the whole history. I love to know the history of songs, you know?
I think the only reason I know it is because I was using it in that film. I said, "What's
Yeah.
that? What's the Benny Hill song? What's that piece?"
Okay, here's 2 questions. Thank you, Anthony. It's really fun. 2 questions from Alan Turing in 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Very spiritual. Um, that's I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know that one. What was his answer? Did he have an answer to that?
That's a great question. I don't know. All I did was I mean, I'm sure we could research it, but I don't know his answer. Yeah.
'Cause
But
This,
again, there's this so diversity in how people approach that question.
yeah. Well, does thinking come from the soul?
Was thinking a function of
Function,
the soul.
function,
So come
function.
from and function are similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I just the word brain is in my it just keeps. I mean, thinking comes from the brain, but that's kind of obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to believe. I keep trying to find an example of how thinking can be a function of the soul. Um, when I think of soul, I think spiritual.
Yeah.
So it's kind of pigeonholing the soul in a way, in a way, to say that it's a yeah. I have to come back to that one. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
That's fine.
Yeah. It might
This-
something else might trigger a response to that later on, but
yeah.
I'll keep that in the back of my mind.
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Only if they're programmed by very intelligent people.
You brought up brain, you anticipated this question.
Yeah.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
No, I think it's there, and we're detecting it.
Yeah.
I think you know, the world has been here a long time, and there's a lot around us. I think we want to believe we're creating it, but I think we're detecting it. I think ultimately we're detectives, and we're feeling our way around and
Yeah.
our way through. Egotistically, we want to believe we're creating it, but we're not.
Good. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
um, Speed of light, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a poet, Audre Lorde. She says, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
So repeat that again. So this,
Yeah, well, the thing is again, this is a good example. You put the question in the context you want. Just
yeah,
because I put a snappy quote before the question doesn't mean you have to apply the quote. So
right,
she's talking about, and it's metaphorical, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. So a lot of people think that's political. She's a feminist. It might be not so much. It could mean many things. The
right,
master's house could be you're the director of the play.
right.
You're the master. So whatever. But Yvonne Rainer says no. You can do that by exposing the tool. So then, when I say what new tool do you suggest, it's really what tool do you gravitate towards. If it's new-ish, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm primarily, I'm an editor. I've been editing for many years, and the tools that I use are primarily computers.
Yeah,
When I'm directing and I'm working with actors, I'm using my sensibility and my empathy and my instincts. But that being said, when I'm editing, I'm using those as well. So I think as far as our tools go, and whether or not they're new tools or old tools, we use our sensibilities and apply them to whatever physical
yeah,
application we're working with, and whether it's computer, and in my case it's computers. I'm basically when I'm editing, I'm applying all of my whatever editorial skills and knowledge of filmmaking, and I'm also using my sensibility as a human to create something artistic.
yeah.
And
Because it's also that the computer is a physical thing. The stage is a physical thing. But I often get that. The tool is empathy, sensibility. That was good. What new toy do you suggest?
um, gosh, new toy. Yeah, there was. Let me think about that one. There are. I'm thinking in terms of like cameras and stuff like that. But my son, my youngest son, my oldest son's a musician. My youngest son is a budding filmmaker, and speaking of new toys, he's always they're his school has so much equipment, and so many toys to play with. I keep wondering like what the new toy is going to be when he comes home. Right now it's DSLR cameras and stuff like that, but eventually it's going to be virtual reality, something. We went to visit SCAD recently in Savannah, and they have an incredible like XR theater, XR studio where if you've seen The Mandalorian, you've seen the way they do their backgrounds and how
Yeah.
realistic it is. And that's, as far as new tools go, that's the cool new tool as far as I'm concerned. It's as far as like creating films and storytelling and TV.
Yep. No, that
That's a
was good.
cool new tool.
Really good, Anthony. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Really, I have to say, I really don't worry. Whenever anyone says they have trouble sleeping, I very rarely. I mean, this is great. I mean, thank God, this is great to say. I really don't have any trouble sleeping. If I worry about anything, it has to do with either the work I have to do the next day, and it's not so much worry. It's more about it's thinking about it. It's planning. Yeah. Sometimes I'll be in bed and my wife and I will be in bed for like 15, 20 minutes, and all of a sudden I'll get up and she's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "I have to write something down." And sometimes it's a few things. I have a thought and I don't want to forget it for the next morning, and it's either because of an editorial project I'm working on, or a play that I'm directing, or something that I really, I should keep a pad and a pen by my on my nightstand, but I don't, and I should. But
Yeah.
yes, it's not so much a worry. It's about more planning, I think.
Good.
But you could say it's worry. It's worry that I'm going to forget. So that's yeah. Okay, so that's what I worry about. I worry about forgetting what I need to do the next day.
Right. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. Artists meaning theater directors, editors, painters, musicians. As the antenna of the race, artists are broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. And so I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Because they might be too painful sometimes to admit. There's a great play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? You know it.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Edward Albee. And I think the basis behind that play is like people always talk about George and Martha and how they're they fight and they're these like they come off as bitter rivals, but
Yeah.
really they love the underlying theme of that is they really truly love each other, and the only way that they can deal with the pain of their existence is by inventing scenarios or playing games or teasing other people, which is what happens when the other couple come in. So one of the things that art does is it gets out of ourselves and it allows us to deal with painful issues, in ways that that doesn't necessarily hurt us, although it can. But like in that case, I love to use them as an example because they're dealing with they're each broken in their own ways, and one of the ways that they're broken is they can't have a child. They want to have a child and they can't.
Yeah.
So I think that like art allows us to deal with issues that we might not necessarily be able to deal with in other ways.
Really good. Do artists have moral obligation?
I think if you think too much about the moral aspect of what you're creating, it's going to impede creativity. I think
Yeah.
if you're creating, you have to think beyond morality. You have to think, okay, this is something I want to say, I want to put it out there, and it's up to others to interpret how they feel about it. And if they think it's immoral, that's up to interpretation. If they think it's beneficial to mankind, it's up to interpretation. But I think that the main task of the artist is to create and to put something out there that they believe in strongly.
Yeah.
They believe in, and it's up to anyone else to decide whether or not, they, they find it, immoral or whatever. So I don't think I don't think there's a moral obligation for artists. And I think the best artists put it out there, whether or not it's whether or not we think it's right, wrong, or whatever. It's yeah.
I agree, Anthony, and I just learned last night.
I think it's the opposite. I think it's like you're in a lot of trouble if you're thinking about what other people are going to think before you put it out there.
Yeah, well, no, Warhol said it best. He says, "Don't worry about what people think of your art. Just keep making it."
Yeah.
And that's hard because we want to think. But someone taught me just a couple days ago that Susan Sontag, she said, great art should make you feel nervous.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge because, and it's, you sort of feel what she's saying, not negative, but you shouldn't be so, because we grew up with feel good films,
Right.
they coddle you. And is that bad? No, that's not necessarily bad, but, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Neither. I'm not afraid of any ideas. I think, I mean, new ideas, old ideas. I think old ideas become new ideas. Yeah, it's not. There's no fear of either. I do. I am interested in what you said about like in terms of entertaining and how people sort of focus on um, not art, but sort of entertain like films, for instance. There's two camps. There's like those who want to be entertained and those who want to get something out of it. Those who want to think about it. And you know, a lot of people are talking about that new film that's on Netflix, Blonde.
Yeah.
It's you know the Marilyn Monroe film supposedly, and people are very angry about it and upset about it, and rightfully so. And you know, my thought was, why does that film exist in the first place? Why? What did the filmmaker? What was the intention besides arousing anger in people?
Yeah.
So if you're, you know, the thing is, if you're someone who's looking to be entertained and you're looking for a biography on Marilyn Monroe, you're going to turn it on and within the first 15 minutes, you're going to be appalled. And you hopefully you'll just turn it on and be done. And this is not the film I want to see. But if you want something that you're going to, you know, maybe think about and try to, you know, ascertain like what the filmmaker had in mind, even if it makes you angry. I mean, it's a 3-hour film, so it's an investment. But even if it pisses you off, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because then you're doing what you're grappling with, you know, what was the intention behind that? Why would he create this? You know, I mean, he's 10 years working on it and putting it together based on Joyce Carol Oates's novella. So it's like there's those two camps. There's the camp of what are you trying to get out of content or you know, films or books for that matter, or anything really, any artistic endeavor. Are you looking to have your thoughts and feelings aroused, or are you just looking to be entertained? Because there's two camps that you can, you know, two ways you can go with either of those.
Well, McLuhan said in 57, he says, it's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between entertainment and education, because the bottom line is whatever pleases teaches more effectively. Right. So you can go, you know, you suss that out well. So can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Well, when you mentioned that about entertaining and teaching, it's not my earliest memory, but I will say this. In high school, first of all, I was never the greatest student. It seems like I would be, because I'm a big reader, and you know, the things I gravitate towards are sort of intellectual. But when I was a kid, I wanted nothing more than to get out of school as quickly as I could. But I always loved English. I always loved English class, and but there was one class, one English teacher in high school that I just could not. I could not sit through his class. I ended up failing his class and taking it at night school. And the teacher in the night class was amazing. He taught Edgar Allan Poe, and he taught everything that I was just completely, you know, just interested in and immersed in. And this guy, and he talked about like Ralph Bakshi films, like American Pop. And this was a guy who was in tune to, he was probably, you know, he just understood. He understood what we would gravitate towards, and he was just a like-minded individual. And I was like, yep, I passed his class with flying colors and kept going down that route. I mean, I always loved English. That was always my favorite subject, because I was always writing when I was a kid. Yeah. And so I guess that's part of it. It's like the best teachers are the ones who have that. They're entertaining in their way, but they're excited and passionate about it, about what they do, and that's contagious. You know.
Yeah.
You know.
Anthony, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
sometimes it's more of a curse. Like I'll say that Facebook, you have your memories. You can go to your memories and see what happened like last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever. And I always say to my wife, sometimes I hate going through those memories because I just feel terrible. I feel like, it makes me sad. It's like, why does it make you sad? I said, well, because we had such a great time at this place 5 years ago, and look how cute Justin was when he was little, and look how you just remember when I directed this play in the city and how great the response was and all that. It just brings up feelings of, oh, I miss those days. And that's the worst. You don't want to feel that way. You always want to think
Yeah.
towards the future. But yeah, so memories, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. It's like it's great to look. I mean, but the bottom line is, I look back anyway, even though I say
Yeah.
I don't. It hurts me in some ways. I look anyway.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Like you have that natural curiosity to see like what happened last year at this time. Oh, I
Yeah.
wish we were back again.
You sort of touched on this, but tell me just briefly, a person within your immediate family, like a role model, they had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact? And then outside your immediate family.
Mm. Um, my mom was very really like a very good person. She was empathetic. She was funny. She had a great sense of humor, an infectious laugh. She put everyone above herself, everyone's needs above her own. So, I mean, as far as role models go, I think that she was a really terrific, like, wonderful person, and I always like to believe that, I have a lot of that in her. But I wish I was more like my dad in a lot of ways. So my dad he was, like I said, he was a police officer, and he was like the toughest guy I've ever known. And I'm not. My younger brother Chris, he's a tough guy. This he will, he's like, I look at him like, I wish I could do that. Like he does the things that you think he thinks he's like, oh, I want to go and punch this guy's face because he's being such an asshole. He's like that. He would do that. And my dad was like, he wasn't a violent guy, but he was tough, and he didn't take shit
Yeah.
from anybody. And as much as I want to be that guy, I can be to a certain extent, but I'm not that guy. So I wish I had a little bit more of that, a little bit more of that toughness. I definitely have more of my mother's sensitivity.
Beautiful. Now, outside your immediate family, someone.
I would say my wife's, really big influence on me. When my wife and I have been together since high school. We met in art class when I was 16, she was 15, at Utrecht High School in Brooklyn. And I remember just early on meeting her family, her sister in particular, and her husband, Tom. They were teachers. And and my wife became a teacher subsequently, and there were teachers in her family. My nephew, her nephew. I always looked up to them as an influence also, because I admired them, and they were, they to this day, they'll travel. Like they got married and they moved to Kuwait, and they lived in Kuwait for a few years. They lived in Saudi Arabia. They lived in Argentina and Venezuela. They've gone everywhere, and they just do it. They're fearless in that way. I'm sure it's not easy, of course, but they're fearless in that way. So I always sort of admired them, and even from back then when
Fearless is a great trait. That's hard. Courage, risk taking. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Catholic. Yeah, I went to a Catholic school, St. Finbar in Brooklyn.
Do you pray?
Not regularly, but there will be times when I will ask for help. I'll pray for help, or I'll pray for some things to turn out well. So if the question is, do I believe in God? I would say I do. Do I believe in God in the traditional way that I was brought up in Catholic school? I'm not sure, because he was the man with the white beard in the clouds. I don't believe that, but I do believe in beyond what we have in our world. I believe in another force because I mean, and I say to my kids because my kids don't really believe, but I always say there's just too many things that could have gone horribly wrong or horribly worse than they did. You know, if there's not something out there, and this may sound like Pollyanna or just crazy, but I just think that there's something out there watching over us sometimes because there have been too many situations in my life where I said, "Wow, that could have been really, really bad. This, that car could have like nailed us, or something like horribly wrong something could have gone horribly wrong." But I just it's a sense, and it might just be from that Catholic upbringing. Someone who's watching over you, it could be that. I don't know, but right or wrong, I take some kind of comfort in thinking in those terms when something goes wrong, and believing that things are going to turn out all right. Because I believe that things ultimately will turn out all right.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, you did everything you wanted to do.
Beautiful. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think evil people exist. I don't think evil uses people as a vehicle. I think evil comes from the person. It's kind of it seems a little too easy to label somebody evil or not evil, but we've certainly known enough evil people in our times that to be able to consider evil as a trait that comes from someone. I believe it comes from the person.
Because it's actually the hidden question here is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And a few modern thinkers, Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you, Anthony, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Trying to think of like what I usually tell my son if he has if there's a kid in school that's bothering him or treating him badly. That's the best example. I think what I try to do is tell him to not ignore, but don't acknowledge, don't give them that power, don't acknowledge them, because the more you try to get something from that person, the worse it's going to be for you. You're never going to get what you want from someone. Like if you want somebody to like you, or if someone is treating you badly, then the best course is to change a course. Just get as far away from them as possible, because you're not going to change anyone. You're not going to change anyone, and they have their own agenda. If they're treating you badly, I usually say there's something wrong in their life. They're trying to make themselves feel better. There's an insecurity that they need to hurt you to make themselves feel better. So these are not people that you want to acknowledge. These are not people you want to give your time to. You don't want to think about them. You want to stay away from them as far away from them as possible. It doesn't always work. It does, human nature is we want people to like us. We don't want enemies in our lives. We don't want to think that there's anyone out there who is our enemy or dislikes us. So we overcompensate sometimes. But I think if someone's treating you badly, and I certainly had this when I was a kid, you got to get as far away from them as possible.
Totally, Anthony. It really brought up Sam Goldwyn used to say, as for the critics, don't even ignore them. So walk us through just briefly how you got, like, your tipping points, how you got to pursuing film editing and pursuing theater directing? Because you said, you know, you weren't good in school, you loved English and you loved reading, but
Yeah.
what's the tipping point? Are you seeing movies and you can find out about what film directing or film editing is? How did
Yeah.
you get that tipping point for film editing and for theater directing?
So when I was a kid, I think I was a daydreamer. Like
Yeah.
I could remember like many times where the teacher she'd be going through a lesson, and then the next thing I heard was Anthony, because I was staring out a window, you know,
Yeah.
and that was me. I always had other things, you know, going on, and so school was just kind of got in the way. Like there were other things I wanted to be doing.
Right.
Um, but I knew what I wanted at a pretty young age. Like when I was maybe 13, 14, I always drew, and I wanted to be a comic book artist. And then somewhere along the line, I discovered my parents' Super 8 film camera and started shooting films with my friends. So like 14, 15, 16, like that. And when you're shooting, you know, you're shooting Super 8, you're not editing. You're editing. I didn't realize at the time that I was editing in camera, because you would shoot and then change position, shoot, changes position, and not realizing I was actually editing in the camera.
Yep.
So I gravitated towards editing at a young age without even realizing it. But when I went to school, I went to the Center for the Media Arts for TV production, and that was where I was always interested in directing and editing. And so when I went to school, I found myself telling the other students, "Hey, you know, let me cut your film. Let me do that for you. I have an idea for this. Let me do." So I was pulling other people's, you know, projects and editing them for them. So that's where I gravitated more towards editing, and it served me pretty well, because it was a great career path. Because when I graduated, then I was able to get a job in advertising at an ad agency, DDB. This is after a few years of trying different agencies, and there was one that had an in-house facility where I could edit in-house, and that's where I started editing commercials. So directing and editing was always sort of the thing I wanted to do from when I was 16 years old. So I knew I was going to go down that path. The interest in film, it's going to sound weird, but it was really Woody Allen movies that sort of tipped the iceberg for me, because when I was 14, I saw Stardust Memories. It was 1980, and Stardust Memories, I don't know if you remember, but it's black and white, and I didn't know what 8.5 was. 8.5 is the Fellini film, and I didn't know anything about 8.5. All I knew is that the reviews that I read about Stardust Memories focused on how it was Woody Allen's version of 8.5. So I said, 8.5, what is that? So I investigated what that was.
Yeah.
Saw 8.5, loved it. And it was through his films, because he was always he was paying homage to Fellini or Ingmar Bergman. I didn't know who any of these filmmakers were, but I investigated based on, you know, what I learned from his films, and that was my film school. That's how I learned all that.
Dude, you gotta hand it to Woody Allen, because he led you to your film school sort of background, you know, and you weren't going to art films, you got into them. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So then how did that lead into theater directing? You have your career, you're doing editing in ads, you're making your money, raising your family. Where's the kick over into theater directing?
So here's I was always into theater from when I was a kid. When I saw Sweeney Todd when I was, again, 14. A lot happened when I was 14, now that I think of it. But I saw Sweeney Todd on Broadway, the original production, and it blew me away. I loved it. And then when I met my wife, we met, like I said, we met in high school. I was 16, she was 15. We would do things that kids that age don't normally do. Like we would go into the city. I was 16, 17, 18. We would come into the city and we'd go see a play. And we would see musicals, we'd see Chorus Line on 42nd Street. And then, we'd go to the booth at TKTS or TDF on 44th Street in Times Square, and we'd find whatever was on the board, and we'd see something. So there was one at one point. There was a play. We had never seen anything off Broadway. We'd only seen plays on Broadway. So there was one play called Fool for Love, and that's all I knew about it. I didn't know the story. I didn't know anything about it. But we said, "Oh, Fool for Love. It might be like a romantic comedy. Let's go see that." The tickets were like $15 each or something like that. So we went, and this little theater off Broadway. And do you know Fool for Love by Sam Shepard? Do you know that play?
I don't know, but I know Sam Shepard. Go ahead. Yeah, this is good.
Fool for Love is anything but a light romantic comedy.
Yeah.
It's a complete opposite. There's doors slamming. It's this, these two people who, they're enclosed in this hotel room on the outskirts of the Mojave Desert, and the whole idea is they can't live with each other. They can't live without each other, and they also happen to be brother and sister. So
whoa!
It's really like an intense love story, right?
Yeah.
Very unusual, intense love story. So Allison, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, she was pretty much asleep, and I couldn't get enough. I was I loved every minute of it, and I said, "This is what I have to do." And I was 17 years old. I put that away for years, working in advertising, editing commercials, very successful career over the years, doing what I love, thank God. And then in 2004 or something like that, I had an opportunity to direct a play. A friend of mine called up and said, she has a friend who wrote a play. They have the theater booked. The director left the production, and there's this whole big backstory to that I won't get into, but they needed a director and asked me if I would be interested in doing it. And I said, yeah. So it was this opportunity, and that's what I mean. There's no coincidence. Things happen for a reason, right? It just fell into my lap. I directed the play. It was off Broadway in Manhattan. Great experience. And then a few years go by, and I was trying to put together a feature film, and so that's a lot of time, raising money, and that's a whole other deal. But throughout the years, even though I'm still working in advertising, I'm editing commercials, loving what I do, I still wanted to do more.
Yeah.
So in 2009, I said, you know what? I'm going to do once a year. I'm going to do at least one thing for me. It's either going to be a play or a film, but it's going to be one thing for me. And
nice.
So the play I directed in 2009 was Fool for Love.
Nice. Well, you have a great background, Woody Allen, Sam Shepard. That's really cool. But a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. Talk about intention in your creative process.
Right. I gravitate towards projects that are about, like I mentioned, George and Martha, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I gravitate towards, and I think Fool for Love is another great example, people who are broken. Like I gravitate towards, there are two things that I gravitate towards in the work that I like to do and the work that I respond to, and that's people who are broken, and somehow by having each other, maybe they're less broken.
Yeah.
And also about stories about connecting and people wanting to connect and maybe not being able to connect. In Acoustic Space, my play is an example of that, where it's about a failure to connect.
Yeah.
But those are stories that I love, and stuff that that I respond to, the kind of work that I like to do, whether it's a play or a film or whatever. Whether I've written it myself or I'm directing it, I'm directing a production. That's the kind of
Anthony, when you're writing a play, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience when you're writing a play?
I don't. Never. I never think about the audience. I only think about what story I want to tell. It's funny. I never think about the audience. I always think about like I have an idea, I put it down, and hopefully people are interested in seeing it. That'd be great. But I never think about the audience ever. I only think about the story I want to tell.
Great experimental filmmaker Hollis Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we are waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the times that I feel most alive is when I'm directing something, when I'm either when I'm the whole process. It's writing a play or a film, directing it, and even the process of script analysis and the preparation. Like I love the whole process. I love the rehearsal process. Like actors, I always make them laugh because I'll say something like, we don't even have to have a production. We could just keep rehearsing, and I'll be happy. It's like the times that I feel most alive are those times. It's such a gratifying, wonderful experience, and you feel like you're just firing on all cylinders. Like you're using every fiber of your sensibility and your being. That's just there's nothing like it.
It's pretty good and very inspiring. Anthony, Louis Leo Bersani, he has a lit crit who just died recently. He studied Mallarmé, the French symbolist poet, and he said, the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So we could just say, in your sense, like the very crises that threatens the writing of theater sustains the play's composition. I'm not saying it's true or not, but any thoughts on that idea?
I think I don't know. As far as writing, there's something about, I don't know. There's something that I don't know what it is. There's just something that compels me to write. I don't know if there's a thread of any kind, but it's a need. It's I'm trying to think of like what comes first. Is it the vision or the need? Sometimes it's a line that comes to mind. Sometimes it's a setting. I wrote a play called Max and Domino that actually Paul came to and wrote a really nice review about. It's this it ultimately all takes place in this guy's mind who's on an operating table and dying. But the gist of the story is these two people, a man and woman, who were at each other's throats in a dark subterranean world. Sometimes it's the dark subterranean world that comes to me, and I don't know what compels that.
Yeah.
What propels it. But there's something that it's just something that has to materialize. It's something that comes to mind, and it forces itself to come to being.
It's almost like the word I've heard is compulsion. What do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
To communicate.
Yeah.
To communicate, because that was the way they could communicate, through imagery. And it's interesting because it's like that's what we do, right? As filmmakers and storytellers, we're communicating. They're telling stories. They're communicating stories, and that's what we do, right?
Well, right along that line is two of my film heroes, their mantras. George Manupelli says, "Ignore yourself." Jonas Mekas says, "There is no self-expression," and Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, "I'm just a vehicle, and this stuff just comes through me." So is art making, playwriting, film editing, is it more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture, technologies, environments are dominant?
Yeah, I think I never really thought of it that way, but because you feel like if you're expressing yourself, it's self-expression, and it's automatic, right? But it's not really the case. I think it's you're trying to say something. You're the conduit to the
Yeah.
message, right?
Yeah.
So space is like I'm trying to say something about how technology has changed the way we communicate. Um,
Well,
it's
can
coming.
art
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So I mean, it's I did a film called Marital Arts, which is about a couple who um, they have a unique way of expressing their love for each other. They have this role playing thing going on. So and I would always say whenever I would present it at a film festival, I'd say, this does not reflect. I have to offer a disclaimer that this does not reflect my marriage in any way. So I'm not putting myself out there on
Yeah.
screen. I'm the conduit towards showing how these people,
Yeah.
how they keep their marriage fresh. So it's not always
Well,
expression of the self in the sense that I'm putting myself out there for all of you to see. It's
yeah.
only in the sense that I'm the person being the vehicle or the conduit for this, the story to be told.
Can art making be egoless?
Well, ego is the self. So can it be egoless? I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a fun question because you know how it's been answered for most of the 20, 30 years I've been asking it. They go, no. And then about a year ago, someone said, great art is egoless. And then a couple months ago, someone said, it has to be egoless. So it is, it's just how then you follow it up by saying, well, what's the ego? Is Freud right? He defined something and then we believe that as what it's true. So it's sort of like, again, how we define the words, but go ahead. Yeah.
Think of the ego as the self. I mean, you can't. Can you look at a Picasso and say, I mean, a Picasso is a Picasso.
Yeah.
A Dali's a Dali.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can separate the ego from the artist.
Yeah.
I think you can mask it in a sense, but you can't really. You can't have one without the other. I think it is. It goes hand in hand. I don't think you can separate it.
And then there's the question of universality. Why does some art speak to so many people and some doesn't? Because maybe it doesn't have an ego in it, but who knows? It really is a follow-up question, Anthony, is my friend talks about the 3 T's of music: technique, theory, and taste. So you can learn how to edit, know what buttons to push. That's technique. You can know the theories, of juxtaposition in film editing. How does one acquire taste? Like you brought up Woody Allen and Sam Shepard. Somehow you gravitated towards them. But how does one develop taste?
Right. So, taste is you develop that through what you like or what you don't like. I think it's like I mentioned Finding Sandler earlier, and when I started working on that, like I had never seen an Adam Sandler film, and nothing against Adam Sandler, he's great,
Yeah.
but I'd never seen a film of his, maybe except for maybe Spanglish, which is not really a quintessential Adam Sandler film in any sense. But when Dave Cohen came to me and asked me to work on this with him, he's a great filmmaker, great sense of humor. He has a great sensibility. Our tastes are completely different. You know what I mean? He grew up watching Sandler movies. I grew up watching Woody Allen movies. So I grew up watching Manhattan and Stardust Memories and not especially the early funny ones, which I did watch, but I gravitated more towards the later ones, the Purple Rose of Cairo and the more serious one, Hannah and Her Sisters, Another Woman. His sensibility was more, his taste tended more towards sort of that you know, I don't want to call it sophomoric. I don't want to denigrate anybody, but it's a different taste, and
Yeah.
that's what he, you know, was interested in, and somehow because those sensibilities were different, we ended up working really well together and ended up complementing each other very well. So it ended up being a great thing. But as far as taste goes, cultivating taste and it's not something you learn. You know, it's something you like. You know, taste is what, you know, generally, you know, generally just what you know what you like. Like what
Yeah.
like
Well,
what's your taste?
well, yeah, I mean, I go into that, but let's carry. I mean, I believe me, I think Woody Allen, Sam Shepard is great. You know, that's you that's pinnacle stuff. You know, that's like really great stuff. And it's funny because now my friend who teaches film, he can't mention Woody Allen in his film class because they will jump all over him. And
Well,
it's like, dude, you got
that's
to
the same.
learn to separate the art from the artist, but it's not worth it
Well,
because he's got a limited amount of time to teach him something. Why do that? So, anyways, this is
you
a
know, I just want to just interject this quickly because unfortunately that's the case right now. I mean, because so much has been exposed about him, you know, on a personal level and things that he's done, and I hesitate even mentioning him. But the bottom line is he was an influence for me.
you can't deny it. And it's you separate the art from the artist. So here's an editing question. Michael Apted, you know, 40 years ago, I asked him, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922 in France, but it really flourished in the 80s with MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I ask this with a bias. Can humans literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Yeah, I kind of think we're brainwashed to believe we can. I don't know. This may be for the you know, for like my kids to answer more than me, but I don't know. I think it's, I don't know, can we take in information faster? Maybe we can. As far as like cutting goes, you know, I like to compare. This may be getting off topic, but I always like to compare the two movies, Cabaret and Chicago.
Yes.
They were both directed by Bob Fosse.
Yes.
But I always say that Cabaret is something that was made with someone who is not afraid to get his hands dirty, and Chicago was made by someone who has a manicure.
Yeah, really good.
There's a grittiness and an honesty to Cabaret that Chicago masks with flash.
Yeah.
A lot of fast cutting and a lot of, like, to me, disguising that maybe Catherine Zeta-Jones can't dance, and we have to cut around that.
Yeah.
You know? And so I don't know if it's so much about whether or not we can take in the information faster, and that's why that's happening. But the same thing with MTV, it's a style, and it's a, I don't want to say it's, you know, I don't want to say they're hiding anything by cutting fast, but I'm always suspicious when things are cut too fast, especially when it involves dancing or any kind of performance.
Yeah, because, you know, I asked all these questions to Sam Wasson, who wrote that amazing book on Bob Fosse. If you haven't read it, it is amazing. Because Bob, you got it. See, it's you know, Bob Fosse is one of my heroes, and really, truly amazing filmmaker and dancer. And you know, the best line is, in my opinion, is Bob Fosse's dancers dance like they were dancing. They made like they were dancing. They weren't dancing. They were like, it's not faking it, but it's sort of like what Buster Keaton does. He turns a stumble into a dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that goes right along with this question, Anthony. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness.
Yeah.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh, okay. Speaking in front of people, public speaking was a big stumbling block for me for a long time. Um, to the point where about 10 years ago, I was introducing a stage reading that I wrote. It was a feature film that I wrote, and doing a stage reading. And in preparation to get to the city to do it, I had to get stuff done. I had to go to the bank and get money and whatever. And I was so nervous that I forgot my code, my ATM code. It was just gone. It wasn't coming back. So I had to create a new code. It was a whole big thing. But I think over the years, I recognized that as a stumbling block and something that I needed to work on. As much as I, even when I'm directing a play, I do a lot of directing for center players in Freehold, New Jersey, and what everyone typically does is the director will go out beforehand and introduce the play and make a little bit of a speech. And I had this huge fear, like before going out on stage. I was like, why am I so nervous? I don't know why I was so nervous. I don't know if it was the anticipation or what it was. But over time, I recognized that, and I said, okay, this is not rational, So I have to like work on this and use it and do what I can to overcome this. And that was definitely a huge like hurdle for me over time to overcome. But I did it.
You turned it into a strength. Beautiful. So you've been editing. I'm always fascinated with the editing process. I work with some great editors, and it's just like it's such an important part of filmmaking that people don't realize, because it's almost invisible. It should be invisible. It's like Louis Buñuel said it best. He says, if you come out of a film and you say the cinematography was great, the filmmaker failed. Like if you come out of the film and go, the editor was great, it's not totally, but it is. You want it to help tell the story and create the art. So it's like it's not visible, but
be visceral.
It's organic and it just flows. But tell me, since you've been doing it for so many years, and the beauty is you started analog, because when you were clipping Super 8 film, well, no, you were editing in the camera with Super 8, but did you ever clip and tape it together with tape too?
When I started, it was leaning more towards video editing, but but I did actually have the experience of editing audio, cutting audio physically, like
right.
quarter-inch tape. Like I had never done it before, and when I was working at DDB, you had to work every department. I'd never done anything in audio, so I was thrown into the audio department, and I would have to. That's where I learned how to edit music.
So you have some sense of analog, but most of your career has been digital editing. Tell me, in all the years you've edited, one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
Well, the major element that's changed is the fact that you can instantaneously create quickly create multiple versions of an event. I could have whether it's a 30-second commercial or whatever, a 5-minute video. I could do I have a cut. I want to try another version. I want to try a few alternate takes. I could do that instantaneously before you had to like reconform, and it was a whole process. But the things that stay the same are the theories of what works, what juxtaposes together in a pleasing manner. The eye lines and rhythm. Those are things that don't change. There can be different rhythms for different styles and different genres, but the theories of editorial have stayed the same from the beginning.
Good.
There really aren't very many rules. Like Jean-Luc Godard did. He started jump cutting with Breathless, and that's something that became, it's not a novelty, and it's there are really no set rules.
Right. But
But
it
yeah,
is funny. We just did a salon on Jean-Luc Godard and talked about the jump cut, because really Méliès and Zygmunt Vertov, man with the moving camera in 1922, invented a jump cut. It was
yeah,
just that he put it into the sort of more normal, let's call it Hollywood art film, blah blah blah. It was amazing because it made a big impact on a lot of people. The guy you got right there on your poster, Quentin Tortellini. So, anyways, um, let me ask you. I asked for 90 minutes and we got 10 more left. Can you go a little longer, or you got to end in 10? Okay. Okay, we'll go a little longer. And so, is perception reality?
uh, okay, so is perception reality? So can reality exist without perception? Yes. I think we perceive reality, everyone perceives reality differently. Reality is, this keyboard's a keyboard. I might perceive it differently, but it's still a keyboard. That's real. That's there. You could argue that, well, it's only a keyboard because somebody called it a keyboard. You know what I mean? That's a question that I guess could become very circular if we really think about it. But yeah, no, I think yeah, reality exists without perception. It's there, and the way we perceive it, everyone perceives things differently.
Yeah.
But maybe that could also be considered interpretation,
Yeah.
right?
Well, Lily Tomlin says reality's just a collective hunch,
Mhm.
and it's going back to McLuhan. You invent words, and then it's what happened when there was no spoken word.
Right.
What was reality? But I think the words you've used a lot, like empathy, hunch. It's about inventing new questions, and that's what I like. You've answered several questions by asking a new question, and that's really what this series is about: is inventing new questions and new metaphors.
You know,
So,
you,
go
something
ahead.
I just thought of something. Speaking of language, I thought of Clockwork Orange and
Yeah,
Anthony Burgess, the book and the film,
yeah,
and how he invented another language
yeah,
um, for these characters, these people. And if you read the book, you've seen the movie. Most people have seen the movie, and the
yeah,
language is this alternate language is in the movie. But especially if you read the book, he has a glossary at the end, but you don't really need it. It's sort of like your mind fills in the blanks,
yeah,
so you know what the words mean, even though they're different from the way our normal, what our normal language interprets it as. So it's sort of like it's kind of interesting how we managed to fill in the blanks. It's almost like language. We I don't know. It's like it can be anything.
yeah. And it's also, I think the word might be manifest. If you say something, you're manifesting it. If you think it, maybe you're manifesting it. But just to be aware, Anthony Burgess wrote 8 books on James Joyce. He got what they're talking in Clockwork Orange from Finnegan's Wake. That's Finneganese. That's Joyce. Joyce invented a new language in Finnegan's Wake, and Burgess just sort of hijacked it and put it in Clockwork Orange. And he'd be the first to admit it. And that was the beauty, because we didn't know we were learning Finneganese and James Joyce when we were seeing Clockwork Orange. In fact, I love this question about Kubrick and Clockwork and I'll just ask you just to briefly. Basically, the English cops came to Stanley and said, "Dude, you got to pull this film. It's causing, hoodlums to beat up winos." And and Kubrick knows film doesn't cause the kids. It's part of a zeitgeist, but it probably doesn't cause. Now that's debatable, but the question is, did Stanley pull Clockwork Orange from UK screens only for 30 years because he knew it'd be a good publicity, or because he truly thought his film was causing kids to beat up winos?
I would think I think the other way, that he probably thought it would be better publicity if he pulled it.
Hello.
He didn't give a shit about.
But no, he was scared because they were saying they're going to come and beat up your kids. And James Harris. Yeah, well, James Harris, who worked on 8 Stanley Kubrick films, he sat right in this chair I'm in, and I asked him all these same questions I asked you. And when I asked him that, he says, "Oh, Stanley was 2 things: family and films." He thought they were going to come and beat up his. Now, who knows? If we could ask Stanley the question, he might not even answer it honestly, or he might not know how to answer it. We don't know. But it is, because it's multi-layered. There's many layers to it.
That's wild.
So this is a great follow-up though, actually. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, conviction. Yeah, I think, I don't know. Compromise is something you do because you have to. Conviction is something that you hold fast to, I think that's something that sort of makes us who we are. I mean, we have to stand by our convictions, and right or wrong, it's like that makes us who we are as individuals, right? Compromise, you do it because you have to. You find yourself in a situation, you have to go along with certain things, and that's part of life. But you have to start with the conviction.
T.S. Eliot, the poet, said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
My inner dialogue, I would say, for me, everything comes from a standpoint of love. Like, I love what I do. I love my family. I love films. I love books. I love art. I love being able to express myself creatively. So my inner language is I would say it comes from a source. The source is love more than anything else.
Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When it spurs action. It can, complacency is a really bad thing. Accepting status quo is a really bad thing, and anger can lead to a lot of positive action. And I'm speaking from the standpoint of, I'm really mad at myself for not doing something or other. It could be anger at a person or a thing, but it's really more about anger for me is more about more within, angry at myself for not saying something I should have said, or done what I should have done.
Yeah,
I always the worst thing to have is regrets. So that's why I always say I always try to do the things that I want to do, because I don't want to be mad at myself later for not having done it.
Well, it's interesting because you detailed how these things happened in your life at 14, and there was change. The question is, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I'd say, well, first of all, when I was 12 years old, when I was a kid, up until I was about 14 or 15, I was really overweight. I mean, I was a heavy kid, and they would call me Jelly Belly Marinelli. And we want to talk about enemies. This is like, everyone was kind of my enemy in a way. And I was a very insecure kid. I was alone a lot. I filled the time with reading and comic books and films and all that kind of stuff. But I was kind of an insecure kid, and I didn't know, where things were going to go for me. So if I met myself at 12, if I met my 12-year-old self, I'd say, you know what, you're going to be okay. The best people start out like this. And I've kind of said in some ways, I've said that to my youngest son, who he struggles sometimes with people liking him and all that kind of stuff. He's a great kid, but I always try to tell him, you know, you're feeling this now, and this is normal, but it's going to be okay. You're going to do really well. You're going to be
Beautiful.
fine.
There's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." The comedian Bob Goldthwait morphed it into, "You are what you hate." James Joyce actually said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Louis Buñuel said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this idea, you create what you resist, not so much you, Anthony, but the idea, not one creates what one resists. Any ideas on that thought?
Create what you resist. I'm not sure about that. Only in the sense that I like to challenge myself. So I guess you could possibly see that as a resistance to, you know, if there's a film, or if there's a play that seems a little controversial, that I'd want to get my hands on, I'd want to direct. Maybe that's what it is. It's like challenging myself to do something that I would otherwise resist, and say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe that's too, out there. Maybe that's,
Yeah.
Maybe that's too dark, or my wife might not really agree with that. you know, but ultimately, I like to challenge myself, and I like to take things a little further than, like I said, the status quo is kind of a bad thing. Complacency is a bad thing. And I think the thing that keeps us going and keeps us excited about, creating stuff and doing what we love is the challenge.
It's beautiful. McLuhan says, "Carefully make plans, then do the opposite." That takes courage. That's risk. Beautiful. Couple more and we're out of here. How do you find peace of mind?
Peace of mind is, spending time with my family. Like we're a very close family. We love hanging out together and making plans for, going places and, doing things together, holidays, that kind of stuff. Again, peace of mind for me is, knowing my wife is there, and she's been, we've been together for many, like 40 years, I think now. So that's the great source of just knowing I have her and her support and the support of my family, and doing everything that I love to do. I often say, I know if I'm directing a play, I know I'm going to be gone for a couple of months. And when I say gone, I mean between preparation, right, rehearsal, and performance, it's a lot of time away, because that's above and beyond my day-to-day work. So that's a lot of hours away. And without that support from my family, I don't think I'd be able to do it. If my wife said, "You really should stop doing this," I'd have to seriously consider stopping doing what I love. And she would never do that, because it's not the type of person she is. She knows how much you speak of peace of mind. She knows that's how I sustain, myself, and what makes me who I am. And it's if she wants to see me fulfilled, I want to see her fulfilled, and that's the partnership that we have. That's the piece that's what brings about the most peace of mind, I think, just knowing I have her support.
Great word, partnership. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
Why?
I don't know. It's easier. Just pull
All right. Anthony, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had and never want. Something good I never had and never want. Um, you know, I never really had a great car, like a really great car. I've always had like, a Ford, a Taurus, a
Right.
minivan. I can't say I really want a great car. I
That's
mean,
it.
part of me say, "Oh, Tesla would be great, or this would be great," but it's not really like who I am. It's not really, a car for me is like something that gets me from point A to point B. You know,
That's it.
it's not something
Well,
that I.
well answered. Couple more and we're out of here. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Duck.
Duh. What is the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
The cultural shift that I see today that inspires me is there are more and more ways to express yourself creatively. I think as far as like creating content and if you're daring enough to create something that's personal and put it out there, and there are
That's great.
people that are willing to accept that, because that's part of it also. You can put it out there, but not necessarily get the exposure that you want or the ability to, get your story accepted and distributed. I think that's changing. I think there are more, and we could turn it towards streaming. There are a lot of streaming platforms out there where we could put our work out there, and hopefully be accepted.
It's
Um,
amazing.
I think there are just a lot of ways to put yourself out there if you're brave enough to do it.
Yeah, it's like kudos to Rob Grant for having this channel and podcast because that's it.
Yeah,
Facilitating. My interviews were like once every 4 months. Now they're 4 a week because this platform has made it so easy. You didn't have to drive. I didn't have to drive. Blah blah blah. So it's pretty
great.
amazing. Great answer. Two more and we're out of here. Thornton Wilder, great playwright, said art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
Well, Thornton Wilder wrote Our Town, which is one of my favorite plays of all time.
Amazing. He's a great, great.
It's so hard. It's like that play. I saw it on Broadway with Spalding Gray as the.
Nice.
It was amazing. Um,
But it is interesting what Thornton's saying there. It's like art is telling the secret, but it's hiding it and telling it at the same time.
yeah,
So it's sort of like I it's a hard question for me to ask because I mean you basically told me what it's all about for you, but it's like, is there something deeper, you know, um, like what McLuhan studied, the hidden psychic effects?
right. Um, is this well? I guess for all of us, in a way, it's finding meaning in our lives, and what does that really mean? It's like what brings us joy, what brings us fulfillment. Um, the thing about like when I think about Our Town and Thornton Wilder is, what's that play ultimately about? It's like don't waste your life.
Yeah,
Don't waste your life because it's not. You have every moment counts. Every moment is valuable.
yeah,
And I think the hidden message there is I don't know if it's so hidden, but or if it's a secret, but it's certainly something that anyone who sees that play, um, if they can't articulate it, they certainly feel it. That
yes,
there's something that I need to do, and this play is telling me that I should do it
yeah.
because I might not have tomorrow. this person that I love might not be here tomorrow. This the world can change tomorrow.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think I guess we're all trying. That's the thing. We're all trying to figure out like what that what that special thing is that we want to do, we need to do, and for me, I'm happy that I try to do my best to recognize that every single day that I'm very fortunate to be where I am, to be able to do the work that I love, to be around people that I love, and to be reminded, you know, through through different works like Our Town and what Thornton Wilder is writing. It reminds us that we have to do that. We have to learn and do more, like learn more about ourselves and not take any day for granted.
Yeah, I agree. It's like expressing the gratitude, which you did so well there in sort of like Ram Dass's philosophy, be here now, like be present and appreciate the present.
Mhm.
You know, one of McLuhan's biggest influences was Wyndham Lewis, and he said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future.
Mm.
Now, it sounds a lot of gibberish, but it's actually amazing how you've been very present here for like 90 minutes, and I'm really grateful. It's really been fun, Anthony. So the last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
What gives me the most optimism is, like I said, it's uh, being able to go outside and have this day and know that I can do what I want with it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Um, it all comes down to two things. It's family and work. Being with my
Yeah.
family and doing the work that I love. Those are the two things that
Yeah.
keep me happy, keep me optimistic, and keep me going.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the first question is what's the best thing for a human being? I got that question from Wilhelm Reich. The best thing for a human being is another human being. And they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, what gives you the most optimism? And he says, other people. So it is something about family, and who you work with. That's what's important. And sharing this time with you has really been a delight, Anthony. Thank you so much.
This has been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed this whole time. Thank you so much. It's been an honor speaking with
Thank you.
you. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Anthony. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope it never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.